Now that we've done all of our edging, we can start assembling. So I'll put a teensy bit of glue on there and there. And put them aside to dry momentarily. Once that's nice and tacky, we'll fold it over, press it down hard, and that should hold. So that's what the back of our shoe will look like. Now onto our first difficult bit. Now the back of these rear quarters needs to be sewn together. But as you can see, they are not the same shape. They're not going to meet up nicely. You could do it like so and fold them out, but that's going to be quite thick. Also, we didn't add a margin on here. What we could have done when we were drawing the pattern is add, say, 10 millimeters and then skive that down so that when we sew it together, that way, we could fold it out nicely. But what we are going to do instead is do a butt stitch. So I'm going to use a sewing machine for this, but the way to do it by hand is to basically you punch holes all the way along and corresponding ones, and you can either go directly across or you can do a crisscross pattern, whatever works, as long as at the end of it they're pushed up hard against each other and they're curved in that shape. But as I said, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use a domestic sewing machine that can do a zigzag stitch. There you have it. So there we've got our rear quarters stitched together at the back. The sewing machine did quite a neat job. So we're going to glue this on the back and then stitch around the edge. So I have marked a center line, which you can do with the pattern piece. And we're just going to rough up some of this to give the glue something to stick on. So you don't want to go too far. In fact, you can mark the point where you want it to go to using the pattern piece for the rear quarter, because it should have the line that we use to draw these. I'm just going to freehand it and hope for the best. I don't recommend doing this. Looks like I can go a bit further. Alright, so now we've got that roughed up, we've got our centre line drawn on. Going to apply glue to this centre section and then very carefully making sure to line up the centre line with that join. Lay that on there. So we'll leave that to get tacky. Now if you want to speed up the process and strengthen that, you can use a heat gun, which activates the glue really well. That works on water-based contact adhesive like this, or on solvent-based as well. So that's nice and tacky now. You'll notice that our center line has disappeared a bit, so I've just scored it with an awl. But if you use a white pen or a silver pen, that will stand out a lot better. So I'm going to start at the bottom. Now this may not show up well on the camera, but I'm sure you can guess what I'm doing. Alright, so that's that attached in the center. and bring it round. In fact, what we'll do, I'm going to use the back of the last to provide a bit of shape. I'm going to mould the back strap around that curve. It's not going to work perfectly well, and it's really just dependent on how well you've glued it, but it just needs to hold in the right place until we can stitch it. So that, as you can see, it's not stuck on right to the edge, but it's pretty good. So there is the back of our shoe. Now we're going to stitch up here and across. You can do a little triangle or some kind of design if you like, and then all the way down. So we'll jump across to the sewing machine. Now I'm going to use a sewing machine, but if you don't have one, I would recommend before you glue that on, punching your stitches. Oh, that's come off. Make sure that's glued down well. Punch your stitches all the way along, across and down. Once you've glued it on, punch through with an awl and then saddle stitch it to the sewing machine. Now the best type of sewing machine for sewing shoes is called a post bed machine, but they're quite uncommon and I don't have one. The next best type is a cylinder arm machine, which I do have just over there, but my machine is set up for binding and so it's not super suited to what we're doing here. I'm going to be using my flatbed machine because it's reliable, does a very nice stitch, and it's the most common type of sewing machine. So I'm assuming if any normal leather worker like a bag maker or wallet maker is watching this and they've got a machine, it will look like this one. So we're going to have to flatten it out a bit just on that, just exactly where we're sewing. Don't try and flatten out the whole thing. Got our edge guide set to about 3 mil away, 2.5, 3 millimeters. And I'm just going to do a back stitch. And here I go. So stop at the top here. Pivot 90 degrees. Now I'm not going to bother doing a design, but you're welcome to. So it's not going to sit right because you've attached a flat piece to a curved piece, but that's what you should end up with. Now that we have our rear quarters and back strap stitched together, we will attach the rear quarter to the vamp. So cover the skived area with glue. Be careful not to go over there, over the line like I did there. One of the benefits of using water-based glue is that it's quite easy to clean off if you do spill it on leather. So I'll wait for them to get tacky. That's now nice and tacky, so we'll put it together. So you're lining up this edge with the edge that you skived to. So you want to completely cover where you skived. You can see the importance of skiving the vamp when you look on the inside here. So this is what is actually going to be contacting your foot. And since we did a good job of skiving that down, there's not going to be this ridge that rubs and rubs and rubs and rubs against your foot and causes blisters and discomfort. So that is what you want the inside to look like. I've gone ahead and stitched this side on. Basically all I've done is normal stitch, back stitch here for strength. I have made a little square here. You don't really need to, this needs to be reinforced a little because that's going to be pulling constantly in use. You can do whatever design you like here. I just did a square because it's easy and it looks good. But that's entirely aesthetic. As long as the stitch doesn't end right there, it ends back here somewhere, then it won't be able to open it up. So I will now glue this side. So it's nice and tacky now, so we'll put it together. Now this will be a bit harder than the other side. You want to make sure this is a good, strong bond, because as you can see on the inside here, the stitching ends there, and so all of this is only being held in place by the glue. So I want to make sure that the glue's nice and tacky when I stick it down, and I apply a good amount of pressure all across that seam. So there we go, time to stitch this. Now this may be a bit hard to show up with the lack of light and the harsh afternoon sun coming in, but what I've done is I've turned the shoe inside out, and I've already done my little square up the top here, and I just need to follow this edge. This is where a flatbed is really not suitable. But if it's all you've got, then it will do the job just fine. So here's a tip for you to get rid of your thread ends and also seal them off so they're not going to pull through. If you're using synthetic threads, then you can use a thread zapper like this. It just melts the ends, and you can push them in. And if you do it well, then you shouldn't be able to tell that it was ever there. So we're done for another day. In today's lesson we have stitched our rear quarters together, we've attached the back strap and stitched it on, and we have stitched the rear quarters to the vamp. In the next lesson we will be finally lasting it all together.